How do? My name is Andrew Hancock and I am a VMware technical architect from Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. I have worked with VMware since their birth in 1998, so that has been over 24 years I've been working with the VMware product catalogue. Some of my close colleagues may say, if you cut Andy in half these days, it reads VMware like a stick of rock from Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I have now written 130 articles and recorded 10 hours of VMware vSphere videos for Experts Exchange and received 41 Experts Exchange awards over the last 10 years working with the Experts Exchange community. I am currently the overall #1 point earner in the Hall of Fame at Experts Exchange. I am honoured to have been accepted into the VMware vExpert program since 2011 and more recently a VMware vExpert Pro for the last 3 years.
Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of Hancock's VMware Half Hour. Although I should say it's probably going to be 60 minutes. And maybe I should actually rename the show Hancock's 60 Minutes. Anyway, so today what I'm going to show you in this video is how we present an iSCSI LUN from our Synology NAS to our ESXi cluster. Now, I previously wrote an article and a video about how to present NFS storage, an NFS export from our Synology NAS. If you browse through my profile and my bio on Experts Exchange, you will see all the way back in 2011, I wrote, created a video, easy peasy lemon squeezy iSCSI storage by Starwind iSCSI SAN software. I'm not sure if the Starwind iSCSI SAN software is still available today. It has been a while, so it's time to refresh that video. And I'm personally not a fan of iSCSI anymore. Back in the day when iSCSI first sort of kind of appeared around ESXi 2 unofficially, we were implementing quite a lot of iSCSI based solutions in favour of fibre channel. iSCSI storage was often regarded as a poor man's fibre channel, but we had access in those days to 1 gigabit networking. Now obviously today we have 10 gigabit networking. And if you're not familiar with the term SCSI, and you're as old as I do to remember a SCSI disk, a SCSI piece of spinning rust, very simply, iSCSI is just the ability to encapsulate SCSI commands in an Ethernet network packet, send them across the wire to a storage processor or a software at the other end, which debundles the SCSI instruction set out of the Ethernet packet and send them to a LUN. A LUN being a chunk of storage. We would, if you implemented lots of SCSI disks in a server back in the day, you would see when you turn the server on that it would come up and say LUN 0, LUN 1, LUN 2, LUN 3, a logical unit number. And iSCSI still talks about creating LUNs, and we present LUNs to ESXi, and then we format those LUNs with a VMFS partition. So if we go back to our lovely 3-host cluster, and if you've been watching all the previous videos, we've got rid of all those other warning messages and error messages which I've produced in the last 3 or 4 videos. And the only warning signs that we've got at the moment is I've got ESXi shell and SSH enabled on R3 host, because later on I'm going to show you how we do some troubleshooting and how we do some diagnosis, again using ping and using VMK ping, because in this video I'm going to set up all the networking required for iSCSI on both our NAS, our Synology NAS, and also create all the VM kernels and all the vSwitches and the jumbo frame bits and pieces that we've done previously for NFS, but now we're talking iSCSI. So again, I'm going to practice what I preach, and I'm recommending that if you're creating storage networks for an NFS or iSCSI, then you ensure that you actually use dedicated storage networks, dedicated storage network interfaces, dedicated network, dedicated switches to handle that storage for iSCSI. So that the actual iSCSI performance is not impacted by any other network traffic, and also to keep it secure as well. So without further ado, I'm going to revisit our Synology NAS, and I'm going to do a bit of tweaking again. Like in your Synology NAS, you may already have networking set up, but I don't have any networking set up currently to do any iSCSI. And if you looked at the NFS video and watched that, you will remember that we created LAN 1 was the network interface that we used for our NFS traffic. So I'm going to use LAN 2 to handle our iSCSI traffic, and I'm going to use a completely different network to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click Edit, and I'm going to set a manual IP address. So I'm going to choose 10.99.1.200. I don't need a gateway and I don't need a DNS. I'm going to set that magic MTU value to 9,000 to jumbo frames. Now remember, jumbo frames is an end-to-end, so we have to set our NAS for jumbo frames, and we have to set our host for jumbo frames, and we have to ensure that the networking piece in the middle, our physical network switch, also support jumbo frames as well. And I'm going to click OK. Now the reason why I'm not a personal fan of iSCSI is because I think that it's a lot more complicated, I think, to configure, or there's an awful lot more you have to think about when you're actually creating an iSCSI connection from an ESXi host to, I'm going to say NAS, but technically iSCSI is a block-based protocol, so it's actually a storage area network. A NAS, NFS, is a file-based system, and I often don't like using iSCSI because iSCSI is an additional layer on top of the NAS function of Synology. So therefore, personally, I don't think that it performs as well as NFS. However, your performance may vary, your mileage may vary, so I would suggest if you're coming in to a greenfield site and you've got a NAS/SAN, you can do NFS, you can do iSCSI, then I would suggest you test both and see which performs best for you. Personally, as I said, we rolled out a lot of iSCSI in 2000, 2001, 2004, and then in the later years we've been migrating off iSCSI to NFS. And I will do another video. I've actually got a proper iSCSI SAN, which has actually got proper storage processors in it, and we'll look at that in another video. Now, for the time being, you may notice that I'm using single LAN connections to provision NFS and a single LAN connection to provision iSCSI. Now, in an ideal world, we would actually want to use teaming. We would want to use multipath, so that we've not got a single point of failure. And we will build on these videos later when I actually show you how to start using teaming and how to start multipath, so that reduces our single point of failure. You have to remember that as you're using a shared storage for your virtual machines, should you lose a network interface, then you will lose access. All your virtual machines effectively will fail and crash. And with that, just let me take a slurp of espresso using my favourite Experts Exchange Original Tech Community mug. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've set our static IP address on our Synology NAS to 10.99.1.200. Now you may remember, if you looked at the NFS video, that we enabled NFS here, access something called the SAN Manager. And that always makes me giggle, really, when I see the word SAN Manager, because I don't really regard the Synology NAS as a SAN. The SAN component, the iSCSI component, is a layer of software that sits above the underlying NAS functions. And this is where I think that with some devices that describe themselves as iSCSI SANs, I think let themselves down. Because of that additional layer, I think that's what can reduce the performance of the product. But I think it's what you need to suck it and see, and your mileage may vary. And if you're in a greenfield environment and you're doing this for the very first time and you're presenting shared storage and you've got an option of NFS or iSCSI, I would suggest that you configure and test both and see which performs best in your environment for your workloads. Now I do have a proper iSCSI SAN that uses a proper storage processors. It's not built on an underlying NAS based solution like a Synology NAS, and dare I say NetApps. NetApp filers were originally fiber channel or NFS, and possibly NFS, and later on an iSCSI function was actually put on base top, but the underlying system in a NetApp, the original NetApps, was an NFS based solution. Okay, so Synology Storage Console we're going to look at in a later video. This is an appliance that sits in your environment, which is wizard driven, that allows you to create NFS data stores and iSCSI data stores very, very quickly. Now I'm a little bit old school. I've been in the industry a while, and once upon a time we didn't have things called GUIs, and everything was done at the command line. And I'm a little bit old school, and it's a habit, and I still really like doing things the old-fashioned way. Call me old-fashioned, but I do it so that I understand all the building blocks that are required. If you use these wizard-based functions that allow you to deploy LUNs, exports very quickly, in the event that you have a problem, it can be sometimes difficult to actually troubleshoot if you don't really know what the wizard actually did at the time. So we're going to come back to the Synology Storage Console in another video, and we'll compare and contrast the modern wizard way or the older way. So I'm going to click OK. So it tells me that my iSCSI services are working well. I don't really know what it means by that, because we don't really have anything configured at the moment. So the first thing we need to do is to click iSCSI, and basically it turns around and tells us that we've got no targets. And target really is a fancy word for an endpoint destination. So we've got no target, so let's click add. So we could actually name the target. We could have one target specifically for VMware vSphere. We could have another target for Hyper-V cluster or an Oracle cluster. So I'm just going to say target 1 for VMware vSphere EE cluster. And it's not actually allowing me to add spaces, I don't think, although I was adding spaces, so no, it's not. So in fact, actually, I'm going to just turn around and say, yeah, target 1 VMware EE cluster. I'm not going to change the IQN, the initiator value. That is formatted to a standard, so I'm not actually going to change that. Now we can enable CHAP, and CHAP is an additional security function that you need to specify the name of the password on your initiator connection on your host. So we're not going to bother with enabling CHAP in this lab, and I'm going to click next. So now it's going to drop me into creating a new LUN and a logical unit number. So I'm just going to say okay, next, create that LUN for me, and I'm going to go with LUN 1. I'm just going to change the description to LUN 1. I'm going to use volume 1, and I'm going to create a 30 gig chunk. Now the moment that I actually create this 30 gig chunk, it's going to remove 30 gig immediately from that volume allocation. And really all this is actually doing is creating a very large 30 gig file called .lun on the BTRFS partition on the Synology NAS. So the moment that we click next, then we're going to use 30 gig immediately. Although we've not formatted this yet with VMFS and we've not put any virtual machines in it, the moment that we actually click next, it's going to use 30 gig immediately. I'm going to use a space allocation of thick provisioning because it's telling me that that uses better performance, and I'm going to click next. Okay, so I'm happy with all those values there, and I'm going to click done and finish. Now there's one other thing that we need to do, but hold that thought, because I'm not going to change that value at the moment, because I want to demonstrate something that is often missed when setting up LUNs for a VMware vSphere cluster. And it's a question that's asked a few times on Experts Exchange. So I'm deliberately going to leave it at that for the moment. So if we look at our overview now, we've got one healthy LUN, we have a target, we have no iSCSI connections at the moment, and we have 3 events, and that's how much is left on our volume, and that's our 30.